Alright guys, Wednesday, February 14th, just after 7 p.m. And as a single guy, I'm able to be out in the garage tonight, so that's a good thing. Anyway, we are going to play around and remove the red paint, the Valentine's Day paint, from the front fender on the passenger side. So we'll get that done, followed by the blue paint on the front valance, and then officially the exterior of the car will be stripped almost 100%. We haven't done the interior of the panels. We've got all that ugly undercoating to get off the inside of those fenders, so that'll be fun, but that'll be for another day. So today we'll concentrate on getting that exterior paint off. So I'm going to grab that angle grinder with that stripping disc, and I'm hoping that this fender should go fairly easily. I don't believe it's got any Bondo in it. It's the factory paint that's on this fender, so it should clean up pretty quickly. The nose of the car, on the other hand, I'm sure it's probably got a fair amount of Bondo in it, but it's a small section to do, so it shouldn't take us too long. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll get to stripping. Alright guys, welcome back. Friday, February 16th, and just come up to 7:30 p.m. And a little bit late start again out in the garage, but it's Friday finally, which is great. I'm looking forward to, we have a long weekend up here, so we have a holiday Monday called Family Day in Ontario. So we're back out here playing around with the TR250, and we're picking up where we left off. I believe it was on Wednesday. I didn't get out here yesterday and was admonished by Ellen for not being out here. We got about this much of that fender stripped before I decided that I was not making too much progress and I needed a new disc. So we picked up a few new discs on the way home from work, stripping discs. So we'll continue to work on this fender. You can see how much of a mess this makes. The garage is just an absolute disaster. I can't wait to get the garage doors open when it warms up finally, probably in, who knows, maybe 6 weeks it'll be warm enough to get the garage doors open. And I'm looking forward to that, to be able to get everything out of here and get it cleaned up, because everything is just covered with a layer of dust, and it's sticky dust. Not like it just blows away easily. So anyway, we'll, like I said, we'll change that stripping disc out, get a fresh one on there, and we'll continue to make some progress on this front fender before we move up to the front valance. And to be able to do the front valance, we're going to remove the grille. We'll probably take the bonnet off. Obviously we need to take the bonnet off to remove the grille, so we'll do that when we get to that point. But like I said, let's finish this fender first. Yeah, it does work. That's all the dust coming out of the garage. Alright guys, the red paint on that front fender is pretty much all gone. There's a few little touch-up areas that I've got to do, but for the most part it's off of there. So there's a look at the passenger side of the car all stripped down, which is looking pretty good. So the only thing left I've got to do is that front valance, and we're going to pull off the hood and the grille to do that. So I think we're going to wait for that till tomorrow. It's just coming up to 9 p.m. So I'll probably call it a night. We'll probably go and have some dinner, and we'll get out here early tomorrow morning and finish that front valance off, and probably do some welding repairs. We'll probably, I think the next step after we finish that is to come back and do a few little fixes that I want to do, like this little area here on this fender. As I mentioned, we're going to cut this and widen it out and shut it back up again with some weld. Maybe do the same at the rear. It's a little bit wide here as well, so We'll make this look a little bit better. There's a few other areas on the car that I probably want to concentrate on. I'm probably not going to be able to live with this gap. It's not that bad, but it could be better, so I'm probably going to weld a little bit of steel rod in there to make that better. The gap at the front is fine, so that's as far basically forward as I want to go, because it'll catch the fender when I open the door. If I go any further forward, I can't really go any further back as we're cutting pretty close to touching the B-post back here, and that's really not going to help me with my gap here in the middle. It's just going to close up this gap at the top more, so we need to work on this sort of center gap here and get that looking a little bit better. So I think that's it for tonight, guys. Well, like I said, we'll get back out here early tomorrow and we'll continue on. Have a good night, guys. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, good morning, guys. Touch coming at you. Saturday, February 17th, just after 10 a.m. And back on the TR250 this morning, and the last thing we need to do is to strip that front valance. So we're going to get to that shortly. As I mentioned, I'm going to remove the bonnet and the grill so I don't damage the grill if I get carried away with the grinder. So it's looking pretty good. I think the other thing we're going to do today, as I mentioned yesterday, is probably work on some of the gaps, particularly on the driver's side. So anyway, it's looking like it's coming together a little better. Yeah. I think what I'm going to do first before I do that front valance is I'm going to do some little repairs here on this flange that I mentioned yesterday, just to get this out of the way. And I'll do this as well. So we'll break out the little Dremel and we'll make a little cut here and spread this flange out, and we'll re-weld it and grind it down. So we'll do that first. Okay, we've made our cuts, or cuts actually. We made one there and one back here. So we'll get the screwdriver out and just move this flange out, and then we'll bring the welder back in and tack it in there before we fully weld it up and grind it down. We hope this works anyway, so we'll come back and see whether we've got success or not. But there is the current gap, and hopefully we'll be able to close that up. Alright, there she is tacked in, so we're just going to go between the gaps and fill that in with weld. It's not the prettiest welding job, but the metal is fairly thin there along that flange. It's had a lot of work done to it, so it's a little bit difficult area to weld. Anyway, we'll continue on, we'll finish that off, then we'll move to the rear gap. Alright guys, we have that fender flange all welded up, front and back. And I think what we'll do now is we'll move to the door opening on the fender. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to weld in a piece of rod from about here down to about here, just to close this area up in here, close the gap down a little bit. It's not the greatest, and I think it requires a bit of rod welded in there to fix it. So we'll go ahead and do that while we have the welder out. And maybe you can get a better idea of the door gap situation if I stand back a little bit and give you a better shot. Maybe it'll give you a little bit better before and after. I've got a few little witness marks here on the fender so I can put it back exactly where I took it off from. So anyway, there's the current gap situation, and we'll see if we can improve upon that. Alright guys, just wanted to give you a quick shot of that rod being welded in. So we welded it in from the back so far. We're just letting it cool before we come back and we fill this gap in here with weld before we ground it down and make it flush with the face of the fender. And obviously we then need to check it versus the gap versus the door, and we will grind off appropriately the amount that we need to get the gaps that we're looking for. We still need to weld a small rod back up into about here. We may just weld it the whole length here and then just grind back what we don't need. So we still got to do that, but I figured I'd fill this part at least first and then go on from there. Alright guys, we've got that rod welded in on the top side. I think it looks pretty good. So we'll break out the grinder and We'll contour that fender to make a good gap. So we're going to bolt this fender back up and figure out where we need to grind it. And we'll go to town. We're going to grind it a little flush first before we do that on the front and the back side. So all we would be concerned with is just evening out the face of it. So we'll get this nice and flush first and then we'll mount it up. Alright guys, a quick shot of the door gaps now with the rod welded in and just faced off. And you can see we basically have no gap here. We've got some gap here because that's where I stopped the rod. I started the rod right there. So the narrowest gap we have is up here, or sorry, the widest gap we have is up here. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to make the rest of the gap equivalent to the widest gap up here at the top. So that means we need to grind a fair amount of metal back out of here, which is fine. Yeah, I think my original mark was made somewhere down here and I just ended up extending some extra rod in there just in case. So we'll just end up grinding that back off to get a good even gap in the end. So there's where we're at to start with, and I'll bring you back when we're done. Hopefully we don't end up over grinding. Alright guys, take a look at this. I think you'll agree it's much better than it was. All the way up to the top. So yeah, I think that's much better. It only took me a couple hours, so I think well worth the effort. So obviously gonna need some body work here, but other than that, I think that closes the gap up pretty nicely. I think it matches the passenger side pretty well now, so we'll call that good to go. We'll move on to something else. Alright guys, there's a quick look of that rear fender all now completed along the top flange as well. Still not perfect, but it's better than it was, so we're going to live with that. And hopefully the beading will cover all of the ills of this rear fender, or some of the ills. Anyway, we're happy with that gap. So we will now move on to the front valence and get that stripped. Alright guys, just coming up to 7 p.m. and I think we're done for the evening. We managed to get that front valence stripped, so we got everything done that we planned to get done today. So there's a look at the front valence. Doesn't look too bad. There's some pretty significant dents over in that corner that we can pull out. It needs a little bit more cleanup, but for the most part it looks okay. Just a few dents here and there. So that should be fairly easy to repair. So that's looking good, and quite happy with the door gap repair today and the fender gap repair. Better than it was anyway, so the car is definitely looking better and better each day. So I think we'll call it a night, as I'd mentioned, and we'll get back out here tomorrow and we'll move on to another area to see if we can make it a little bit better. Alright guys, see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. There, nicely dusted.